great first hour. Hour number 2 on tap. Stephen A., what's your hat on?
Well, obviously, Trump. I can't wait until we get into that discussion and listening to my man Max Kellerman. My closing remarks, you can wait for that. I'm going to stir up a little trouble intentionally, and I don't care. That's just a couple of things on my mind. There's more, but especially that.
Stephen A., sometimes provocative. All right, gentlemen.
That's true. 3 takes, not me. 2 takes if you lucky. First take, they got me.
The National Basketball Association, which of course is a very global league, has contacted the State Department to understand how President Donald Trump's executive order to suspend immigration from 7 countries could impact the league's players. The NBA contacted the State Department before that travel ban ruling, this according to Yahoo. Warriors head coach Steve Kerr, who lost his father to terrorist attacks, had a strong stance on the subject. Take a listen.
I would just say, that as someone whose family member was a victim of terrorism, having lost my father, if we're trying to combat terrorism by banishing people from coming to this country, by really going against the principles of what our country's about and creating fear, it's the wrong way to go about it. If anything, we could be breeding anger and terror, and so I'm completely against what's happening.
That was Steve Kerr on Trump's travel ban. Max, what's your reaction?
First, let me say my reaction is everyone around here, and I'm sure at other media outlets, is very concerned with, if you're going to talk about this subject, getting the facts right. Let's make sure we have the facts right. And it's a little bit frustrating to talk about it because you have to be so careful with how you phrase things. And the reason that's frustrating is because the president and his press secretary and other official mouthpieces do not have to be careful about the facts and how they phrase things. They can get facts wrong. And they can get facts wrong and insist that they're right, which either means that they're lying, or maybe even more horrifyingly, that they really don't know how to vet information, but they're just plain facts that are undisputed that they dispute. So that's a frustrating position to be in. And because of that, when I see leaders, thoughtful men, leaders of men, like Greg Popovich, with a military background, and a great degree of success leading men, a thoughtful person, not mince words, but really take a leadership stance and speak in plain English his problems with what's going on. It's heartening. You feel emboldened. You feel good. And I did a final take about that last week. And Steve Kerr, the same thing, who's suffered tragedy at the hands of terrorists, his father. For him to come out and not mince words also feels good. Another leader, on the American sports scene. Good for them. It makes me happy. And so, look, what are we really talking about here? Steve Kerr's not a rabble-rouser. Not a rabble-rouser. Solid citizen, Steve Kerr. So I'll get the facts very clear here. Forget about just the ban and all that and how that'll affect sports. Let me just say that the reason that Steve Kerr and others, it seems to me, the sense of there's kind of a heightened sense of alarm here, is that if the reports are true from the pro bono lawyers at the airports, when the federal courts gave an order and Customs and Border Security ignored it. Now, if those reports are true, then the question becomes, did they not fully comply with a court order because they didn't know everything or because they were intentionally ignoring the courts? And if that's the case, if that's true that they were intentionally ignoring the courts, then the question becomes, is that on order from the executive branch, from the White House? Because if that's true, we have a constitutional crisis and an attempt to undermine the Constitution and take over the government, bypass checks and balances by the executive branch, by the president. That is the most shocking thing that has happened, if those things are true, in the government in my lifetime. At least I'm 43 years old. So that's, to me, what seems to be the real kind of threat and underpinning of the kind of heightened alarm by people like Popovich and Steve Kerr, the attempt at authoritarianism. And And I'm very proud, you know, when I see the way people have come together around this issue in the sporting world and in other places, the demonstrations at the airports, it makes me proud to be an American. And I love to see the way people are coming together and rallying around this issue. And really, proud might not be the right word, but that's the word that best describes how I felt about Popovich and how I feel about Steve Kerr today.
Well, I respect the hell out of Steve Kerr. And his thoughts on such matters definitely resonate with me, considering what happened to his dad when he was 18 years of age and at University of Arizona, and his father was murdered by terrorists in Beirut. We understand that. I have profound respect for Greg Popovich. And I certainly have a problem with this ban, which to me clearly appears to be a ban against Muslims, no matter which way they slice it. Here's where we also all have to grow up and embrace the reality of the situation. We don't want to sit up there and say it with such situations like this, but money talks. And why would I bring up money? Because I'm looking at the countries on Trump's ban list here: Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Yemen. These are all countries that are on Trump's banned list, none of which he does business with. But the other countries that he does business with: Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, the UAE. He does business with all of those. None of them are on the list. So now we have a situation.
That's essentially where the hijackers of 9/11 came from. Those are the countries of origin.
Right, and when we talk about Saudi Arabia, according to reports, including the Cato Institute, which is a conservative-leaning institute, what is the number here? 2,300 and change of the terrorists from Saudi Arabia. And so when you look at it from that perspective, and the fact that they're not on your ban list, but you do business with them, and you're quoted during the campaign talking about how they buy apartments from you, they generate anywhere from $40 to $50 million from you, you love these folks. Now we get into a dicier situation as it pertains to conflict of interest on the part of our commander-in-chief. Why does that resonate? Because all of these things are things we essentially knew during the campaign. We knew about the wall, the big, beautiful wall that the Mexicans were going to pay for. We heard about that. But 29% of the Latino population voted for him. There were folks that saw and they looked at him and not immediately denouncing David Duke, not immediately, even though he eventually did it. And people pointed to that and they said, you know what, there are some sensitivities in terms of the whole housing issue in the 1970s. Oh, he's supposedly a racist. But he got 2% more of the black vote than Mitt Romney. Then we saw Hillary Clinton out there speaking in a fashion that resonated with various minority communities. But 2 million less black folks came out to vote for her than voted for Barack Obama, when Barack Obama himself was imploring people, get out there and vote. Don't sit up there and complain. Don't protest. As I told you, my boy Jeff and others have always said to me all the time, you know, you got a whole bunch of folks out there protesting, going off all the time. Conservative folks, they don't say too much. They just go to the voting polls and they vote. And so as a result, when we look at this for what it is, Max, what it comes down to is, regardless of how much folks may not like it, the 62.9 million people that voted for this man, he told them he was going to do this. And they voted for him anyway.
And that's why it's important for the media.
And that's what it is.
And that's why it's important for the media. Right. I'm not talking about left or right, just conscientious members of the media. Right. Institutions are only as strong as the people in them, right? And that goes for institutions across the board in this country. During the campaign, once he was elected, I and others said, okay, clean slate time. Many people couldn't get past the divisive rhetoric of the campaign and said, no clean slate. But I and others, like you and others, said, look, okay, now we'll see what not candidate Trump does, but what the administration actually does when in office. And since he assumed the office, he has done everything that he said he was going to do. So now it's time. It wasn't just rhetoric. They were promises that he is now executing. And so for the for the press to sit idly by and mince words and be super careful about how you talk about it is not okay. And I use, for example, the way we talk about this. We go over meticulously making sure to get the facts right. Media outlets, organizations, other institutions, let's get the facts right. But the administration doesn't have to. And now that it's actually an administration, not a candidate, the president, now they have to be held to account, must be brought to, I mean, that's the way it is. When there's a religious test in this country, which they are denying, but obviously Giuliani on Fox and others have said, yeah, he wanted to do this. That's not okay. It's anti-American. It is not okay, and people shouldn't sit still for it.
It's not okay. It's not okay, but the American people decide what is okay and what is not okay by who we elect to put into office. And then you're going to have people that look at his list. They're going to think about what Obama did with Syrians and Iraqis in 2011 and beyond. They're going to have questions. We don't know the answers. We're not trying to go there. But for the purposes of Steve Kerr's comment and Greg Popovich's comments, your comments, which are all valid, we have to recognize that these are alarming concerns. But I believe the biggest concern of all is the fact that he said what he was going to do. He is doing it, and 62.9 million people evidently support it or have buyer's remorse or voter's remorse. It's one or the other. Something is wrong, and that is the way that it is.
Something's really wrong if they're disobeying court orders. That is a real problem. If that's the case.
Some accuse Obama of doing the same thing.
No, you had to be very careful.
But no, that's the problem. There's zero equivalency between what's going on now and the Obama administration.
Not in their eyes.
Zero.
But not in their eyes.
But that's the problem with pretending that there are alternative sets of facts. There is one set of facts, and there is no equivalency.
Not to the people.
We have to go to break. I wish we had more time, guys. We're going to get back to sports when we return. The Cavs beat the Thunder even without Kevin Love in the second half. Does this prove they made a mistake not trading Love for Carmelo? And Carmelo goes off for 45 in a loss to the Hawks. Stephen A. has a lot to say about his performance in his final take.